Welcome to this video on influential speaking and writing, and in this video I want to share an overview of rhetoric and how you can use rhetoric to create an influential and persuasive speech. And to do that I'm going to use this map of rhetoric that you can see behind me here, which I've created based on Cicero's 5 canons of rhetoric. Now before we dive into that map, I want to give a shout out to Aristotle and his 3 pillars of persuasion. Aristotle said that in order to be persuasive, we need a healthy dose of these 3 things, and they are ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is all about credibility. That's your credibility as the speaker and the credibility of the information that you draw upon. Pathos is about emotional connection. Your message needs to be important to your audience. It needs to resonate with them, and you need to move them emotionally. And then finally, logos. Logos is all about logic. Your speech needs to make sense. So make sure that your speech has a healthy dose of ethos, pathos, and logos. So now let's dive into this map to unpack how rhetoric can help us create influential and persuasive speeches. I want to keep this as simple as possible. So we're going to start with a big picture definition of what rhetoric is, so we're all talking about the same thing. Then we're going to move along this map to the 5 canons of rhetoric. Now you can think of the 5 canons quite simply as 5 different sequential stages to go through to create an influential and persuasive speech. So once we've had a big picture overview of those 5 canons, I'm going to zone in to those first 3. And that's because the first 3 are focused on the writing of your speech, and that's where the main body of rhetoric comes in. The last 2 canons are focused on delivery and performance, and I'll deal with those in a different video. Once we've been through the map of rhetoric, I'm then going to debunk a myth about rhetoric, which I think needs debunking. And if you want to download a copy of this map, then you should find a link on the page where you're watching this video. So let's get started. Let's look at that definition of rhetoric. Rhetoric is influential and persuasive writing, speaking, and communication in general. Aristotle said that rhetoric is using all available means to be persuasive. So that's a big picture definition of rhetoric. So let's move along this map to the 5 canons. Let's look at the first canon. The first canon is called invention, and all that is brainstorming. So when you know what your message is and how you want to impact your audience, then you'll know what kind of content is going to support your speech. And that really is where you brainstorm your content and examples to back up your content. So you have all kinds of different content there that you can choose from, but you've got to brainstorm and get as much into that as possible. Once you've done your brainstorming, that's the first stage, the first canon over, then you move on to arrangement, and arrangement is quite simply structure. Now you take all that content and you put it in a logical sequence that builds a narrative that takes your audience from the beginning of your speech through to your conclusion. So the second canon is just about structure. That's called arrangement. The third canon is style. Now to me, this is where it's at. Style is all about language, how we use language to elevate and lift that speech and turn it into an art form. Style is where we, if you like, sprinkle the magic onto your speech. And that is made up of 3 things: syntax, which is word order; diction, which is word choice; and then figures of speech, which is how we use language to create that musicality, if you like, so that it becomes an art form and lands beautifully in the ear of the listener. So that's the first 3 canons. That's where you're writing your speech. You're brainstorming, put it in order, then add beautiful language to it to make it strong and powerful. Those are the first 3 canons. The 4th canon is then you memorize your speech, and the 5th canon is then you deliver it. That's where you use your body, your voice, your mindset to make sure that you're delivering with authenticity and impact. So those are the 5 canons. If you follow those, you will create a very influential and persuasive speech. Let's now zone into those first 3 into a little bit more detail. Invention, brainstorming. Now, in order to brainstorm effectively, there is a question that you have to answer. It's a question that every audience wants to know the answer to, whether they know it consciously or unconsciously. And that is, why are you telling us this now? Now that sounds like one question, but there's actually 5 questions in that question. Let's break those down. First of all, why? Why are you sharing this message? Why are you sharing it with this audience? Why is it important to this audience, or why is it important to the world? Why are you sharing this message? That's the first question you have to answer. The second one is, why are you? Why are you sharing this? What's your connection to this message? What makes you a credible source for this message? What's your story? How are you connected to it? What difference has this made in your life? Why are you telling us? Why are you telling us is the third question. Us is this audience. So why is it relevant to this particular audience? Why are you telling us this? This is about the specific content that you're using to deliver your message. Why are you telling us this? And then finally, why are you telling us this now? Why now? Why not yesterday? Why not tomorrow? Why today? When you can answer those 5 questions in the one question, then you're ready to start your brainstorming effectively. Then you bring in all the different bits of content you think might be relevant, all of the stories that will back up your content, all of the examples that will give credibility to the content that you are using. So that's your brainstorming. And don't stop early. Make sure you brainstorm as much as possible. You get every possible piece of content into that brainstorming. There's no way you're ever going to use all of that, but at least you'll know what to choose from. And when you look, I write everything on Post-it notes and stick it on the wall. And when I look at that, I know my story's in there somewhere. I've just got to find it. But at least I know the content I'm working with. So that's brainstorming. After brainstorming, we move on to the second canon in a little bit more detail, structure. Now, there is no one way to structure a speech. There are many different ways. I'll cover some of those in a different video. But I'm just going to touch on the classic Cicero 5 canons structure arrangement. Now, within structure or arrangement for the 5 canons, there are 6 elements. First, introduction. Secondly, backstory. How much backstory does the audience need? Third, signposting. Let the audience know where you're going to go. Fourth, build your argument. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail in a second. Build your argument in the main body of your message. 5, counter argument. Be aware that there will be opposing opinions, differing opinions. Build those into your speech and take those differing opinions apart in your speech so that you deal with them before people can even raise them. And then finally, your conclusion, which is going to be your call to action, is what do you want your audience to think, feel, and do? What's the takeaway for this audience? So there's a classic structure. It always works. Doesn't mean it's the only one. I just want to step back now into argument. Argument is where we use rhetoric to build a strong, credible argument. And in rhetoric, the elements that make up a strong argument are called topics. Now, some of those would include things like definition. So it is said that the person who controls the definition controls the argument. So if I was talking about youths, and I said by youths, I mean 14 to 17-year-olds, I am now controlling that definition. Anything younger than 14 is not relevant now. Anything over than 17 is no longer relevant. So only what I have defined as being youths. That's because I'm controlling the definitions. That's very powerful in an argument. Control the definitions. Other topics include, for example, testimony from trusted sources. Cause-effect relationships. If we do this, then this will happen. That's a powerful, persuasive device. Similarities and differences. You can pull the similarities between two different things together and say, well, this is just like that, to build an argument. Or difference. You can say, this is nothing like that, to back up your argument. So there are all kinds of topics. These are elements from rhetoric that can build a strong, powerful argument. Far too many to go into in this video, but that's where if you want to learn more about rhetoric and building strong rhetorical arguments, then this is one area to look at, topics within arguments. You've also got deductive and inductive reasoning. I might say that, for example, all teachers are rich, John is a teacher, therefore John is rich. Now that's a deductive argument. Let's look at counter-arguments, because counter-arguments focus on fallacies, where you look to pick apart the problems in other people's arguments. So if I'm looking for a fallacy in what we've just described, I might say, so if somebody said to me, all teachers are rich, John is a teacher, therefore John is rich. And if I'm now looking for a counter-argument to that, I might say, well, actually, all teachers are not rich. And I might use some statistics to show that teachers are not rich. I might use some testimony to show that teachers are not rich. And if I can destroy the all teachers are rich, it means that the conclusion, John is therefore rich, is also destroyed. So I'm now looking for fallacies in counter-arguments to destroy other people's arguments. So these are really powerful elements of argument and counter-argument that you'll find in rhetoric. So I would highly advise that you spend a bit of time exploring topics within rhetoric. So that is structure. That's the second canon. Let's step into the third canon, which is style. Now, for me, as I said, this is where it's at. Style is where we use language in a powerful way. Let's just look at those three elements. Syntax, which is word order. We're looking to catch the ear of the audience by using language artfully. So, for example, President John F. Kennedy famously said, "Ask not what your country can do for you." He didn't say, "Don't ask," which is the correct syntax. He played with the syntax and said, "Ask not what your country can do for you." It catches the ear. You'll find this a lot in great speeches, playing with the word order. But do it sparingly, because if you do it all the time, it's going to sound odd. But if you do it every now and again, it'll be very powerful. It will catch the ear of the listener. So that's syntax. Let's move on to diction. Diction's about word choice. Now, this is really powerful. We're talking about adjectives, adverbs, and we're talking about metaphors, for example. I might say, I have a mountain of paperwork to get through. A mountain of paperwork, that's a very powerful word, using a metaphor like that. Adjectives and adverbs, we can talk about easily accomplish. To accomplish is the verb, easily accomplish changes the nature of to accomplish. It's powerful, influential language. So we're using adjectives, we're using adverbs, we're using metaphors. And then the choice of words, I might talk about a catastrophic event. Not just an event, but a catastrophic event. Not only is it a beautiful word to say, and that helps with the musicality of the speech, catastrophic, 4 syllables, wonderful word, but it also changes the nature of the event. It's building 3D images inside people's minds and imaginations. It's impacting how they feel because we're choosing powerful words. And if you're going to use a word like wonderful, it was a wonderful time, then make sure that wonderful is full of wonder. That's why you would choose that word. I have a mantra when it comes to choosing words for speeches. If you choose it, use it. Get the value from the word. That's why you chose the word in the first place. And again, we're beginning to be really influential with our speaking when we're choosing words like that. So that's syntax, diction, and then figures of speech. Now, figures of speech are how we really play with the musicality of language. For example, if I want to change the pace of my speech, I can choose how I conjugate it. So let me give you the example of an English breakfast, something I know a little bit all too well, I think. I might be talking about eggs, bacon, beans, sausage, tomatoes, hash browns, tea. And because I'm conjugating that with commas, separating that with commas, it's flowing very fast and it's increasing the pace of my speech. Eggs, bacon, beans, sausage, tomatoes. If I change the conjugations to ands instead of commas, eggs and bacon and beans and sausage and tomatoes, and suddenly the rhythm changes and it also begins to feel a bit overwhelming. So now I'm using language in an effective way to impact my audience. Churchill was very famous for using what's known as anaphora, repetition. We shall fight them on the beaches, we shall fight them in the houses, we shall fight them, we shall fight them. So he keeps repeating the phrase. Simon Sinek, in his famous TED Talk, would talk about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And he repeats that 7 times in that speech. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Repetition is very powerful. Rhyme is very powerful. I've just used one. If you choose it, use it. And it's very influential in speaking. So there's all kinds of figures of speech that transform your message into something that's beautiful to listen to and really impactful. And that's what style is all about. So that's just a brief overview of the 5 canons of rhetoric and using rhetoric to create influential and persuasive speeches. Now, I want to debunk a myth here. Many people talk about tone down the rhetoric as if rhetoric is bad. Rhetoric is a tool that will turn any speech into a powerful speech. The problem isn't rhetoric. Rhetoric is great. The problem is the intention of the speaker. That's what we should be looking at, not the tool that makes a speech powerful. So I hope you found this video useful. If you do, maybe pop a comment if there's a comment place where you see this video. And in my next video, what I'm going to do is show how I use rhetoric and the 5 canons of rhetoric to build my speeches. And I'm going to use the example of my latest TED Talk to show how I built that talk using the 5 canons of rhetoric. So thanks for watching.